Steve, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm super excited to speak to you.
Aidan, it's good to be with you.
Excellent. So my first question, and I always love stuff like this to break the ice. What's your favorite place to get a breakfast taco in Austin?
You know, you warned me that I would get this question, and I told you wouldn't like my answer. So I was mayor, for 8 years, and I would get asked a lot, my favorite breakfast taco, my favorite barbecue. And kind of like a parent with multiple children, I used to say that I'm the mayor of all of the breakfast tacos, so I obviously can't pick. And it held me in good stead because I love breakfast tacos. Breakfast tacos is one of the reasons I stayed in Austin after law school and didn't leave. I'm particularly fond of migas breakfast tacos. But to actually pick a particular place means that in only one place will I be welcome, and I found that did not serve me as well. So there are great breakfast tacos in this city.
Too many, you say?
No, there's never too many. But my favorite order would be for a migas taco on flour, without a lot of fufu.
Well, do you like fufu, by the way? I know you've done some traveling in Africa recently. Well, so where in Africa have you been around to?
Been all the way from Egypt in the north to South Africa in the south. A lot of time in Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. It's Diane's favorite place to travel.
Really?
So she brings us back there a lot.
That's a lot of fun. So, preparing for this, I spent a lot of time looking at your track record and all the fun things you've worked on. So, over your career, you've worn a lot of hats as an attorney, a chief of staff, philanthropist, and of course, mayor, and now a teacher. What do you feel like connects those roles for you?
I think what connects those roles are probably enjoying being around people, but also trying to have an impact on quality of life, trying to help people. I think the way that I was raised and where I gravitated, I get the biggest satisfaction from being able to help people, have access and opportunity. That's what I enjoy doing, and I think in each of those roles, you get a chance to teach, which I enjoy. Teacher, obviously, but in the other ones as well. The trial work I did for 40 years is competitive teaching, but also helping people.
What kind of elements of your upbringing do you feel like supported that in you?
I think I'm probably shaped a lot by my parents, who had a really high social consciousness. Probably the friends you happen to make and what your buddies are into. I did a lot of student council work when I was growing up. It just always seemed to be where I gravitated. I used to watch Perry Mason and think, someday I'd love to be doing that and helping people.
Yeah, it's interesting the kinds of people who gravitate towards the law. One thing which I always, obviously I've known you for a few years now, and I remember one of the most insightful things I got from you as I was growing up in college is thinking of, and as I was considering law as a potential path forward, was that a law degree or one's education is not, you don't get that simply just for the profession, but rather your degree represents another weapon in your arsenal. It's another tool for you to view the world through. And I feel like your approach to law in that respect was one of the most insightful and motivating things I've heard, because I find that from the student perspective, when you're growing up and you're not really sure about what you want to do after college, or while you're in college, certainly, that it really helps to think of your education not as the end all of what you're going to turn into, but rather as the development of skills. So I thought something I really appreciated about your insights from the past.
And I believe that, and I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in school. And law school did. It represented a tool. There were so many people that I knew that were lawyers doing so many different things, both as lawyers and not as lawyers. I'm not sure that anybody really learns that much substantive information that they apply, unless you're like an engineer, maybe. Sure. But for most people, I think that what you learn in school is a way to think, a way to problem solve. There's nothing substantively, I think, that I learned in law school that I actually applied. Because when you have a legal issue, you go research the law to find out what the law is at that moment. Right. So, yeah, law school was just a tool for somebody that didn't really know what he wanted to do yet.
And I think that's so interesting, too, because you mentioned that the law is a living thing. It's not as if it's written and thus it is always that way, but it's constantly evolving. And especially in some areas, I can think of tax law as an example, where you constantly have to stay up to date with changes in the legislature. And so in that regard, law is such a fascinating profession because it constantly keeps you on your toes. But also, as you said, I think the advantages of experience lie in the framework of thinking, as opposed to, just that you store up knowledge that is always infinitely useful. Now, what brought you to Austin in the first place?
I came to University of Texas to go to law school because it was the least expensive law school in the country, and I could afford it. Mm-hmm. I grew up in D.C., went to college outside of New York City, knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's where I was going to live. But the University of Texas offered me a scholarship of $100. The significance of getting a $100 scholarship was that you were automatically entitled then to in-state residency status.
Wow.
In-state residency tuition for law school at that time was $8 an hour. So a 15-hour semester cost me $120.
No way.
And I could with my $100 scholarship, that meant it was, $20 a semester. I could swing that. I still had to earn enough money to eat and rent an apartment. Mm-hmm. But it was a highly ranked law school program. They had a lot of money from the oil and gas revenue, so they were bringing in a lot of national and international professors. Right. But mostly I came to Austin because the law school was cheap.
That's so incredible. I think specifically to hear those numbers of a price point in 2025, where I think any young man or woman who has looked at the price of tuition in the modern era has thought to themselves, it's ever so slightly grown.
It's changed.
Since that point.
It's changed.
I think it's such an incredible story to think about the slight nuances and the slight parts. Like, obviously, Austin is now something which you'll be known, which, your life is now deeply associated with. You know what I mean? And your career. And it's funny to think of the slight turns that caused that to be true. I mean, it wasn't as if it was some obvious thing where we were like, well, we knew Steve was going to end up in Austin from the minute he was hanging out here. And so it's just fascinating the way that life brings us. Small paths lead to bigger ones, and then it just kind of goes from there. But I think that also speaks about one's ability to be confident when outcomes are uncertain. So I think a question for you is, in the face of an uncertain future, when you didn't know what you wanted to do, right? Like, well, do I go to more school? Things along those lines. Were you able, how did you feel at that time? Like, were you nervous about the fact that it was unclear, or were you self-confident regardless?
I was both. I think that for most people, certainly me, an unclear future, that level of uncertainty, gives rise to a certain concern because you don't know. It's an unknown. At the same time, I have always felt that whatever it is that happens, I'll play that hand out as well as I possibly can, and I, at some base level, perhaps because of the way that my parents raised me and the self-image that they helped foster in me, I was pretty sure that, and probably overly sure, overly confident, that whatever happened, I'd be okay.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. That's something I would say that is the sort of trait that I think anybody who's trying to build something unique must possess. Because if you're doing things with a certain outcome, that means everyone's done them before, and resultantly the size of your competitive advantage is thus limited. So by riding on unridden paths, you have the chance to do stuff that nobody has any idea how it'll work out, for better or worse, right? So going through your background a little bit, you spent a lot of time, you spent some time working in the legislature. How did that experience shape you and your understanding of governance?
I was fortunate to have a pretty unique seat up at the legislature. One of my law school buddies, fifth generation El Pasoan, ended up running for and getting elected as state senator from El Paso. And he was a friend, so he would come to Austin for 5 months every 2 years and stay with me. And I served as his chief of staff and general counsel to help him set up his office and to help run things. My pay to do that was a pretty decent parking space up at the Capitol.
Is that it?
That was it. I did my law work at night. I had a partner that for 5 months every 2 years was gracious to help cover for me during the day. But because of my relationship with him, I had access to a lot of meetings and conversations and discussions that an ordinary chief of staff even wouldn't have had access to. I was more of a peer, age-wise, of the legislators than were a lot of the people that were making up the staff, their staffs. So again, I had real special access, so I could see a lot. You know, it had lots of different impacts. I was able to meet a lot of the people that were involved in state governance, a lot of the lobby members, a lot of things that eventually helped me when I ran for mayor, although I wasn't ever thinking about that while I was in those roles. It made me really see that a lot of the state leaders and legislative leaders that we all know were just really regular people. It demystified for me people who were in those leadership positions. Some of them were really good, some of them were not, but all of them were like people that you know or that you spend time with. So it was good to get that understanding and that perspective. You begin to recognize that there are some people that are motivated through a desire to really help people, and other people that are motivated because they want to be in a leadership position.
Important.
To get the perks that come with that. And you also see what government can do at scale to impact people's lives for both good and not good.
Right.
So you both learn to really respect the power and potential of government, but also to be concerned and fearful of it.
Yeah, and if I may ask, that chief of staff work, despite the compensation, I'm going to imagine that it required a substantial amount of effort. Is that correct? It was work intensive?
Yes.
I think that something that a superpower I believe that the ambitious possess at times, where it's possible, is that I find oftentimes they find artful ways to pick up work where maybe the pay is below what they deserve, something along those lines, and they're working awful hard, but they're learning and they're getting unique opportunities, things along those lines. And I feel like that's something that's very powerful about your story. I mean, you're a lawyer at the time, obviously. If your only goal was immediate gratification, financially and otherwise, it would have been very simple to say, I'm not doing this kind of work for free. But I think there's something very powerful about that. And it obviously requires a lot of work. It sounds, I imagine you would have had to describe that period as an industrious one, right? But I think that one of the hacks that I always advocate for young folks is if you're trying to get increased responsibility, go to a place where someone can use you, and then do whatever it takes to own that work, right? Go get more responsibility. Because if you go get more responsibility, and all of a sudden you now have to take on this mission-critical task, at whatever price you're being paid to do it, you now have the skill, and it's provable that you have the skill in order to execute. And so then I think you can then go market that, obviously. So I guess the key takeaway from me is that we need to spend a large portion of our lives, oftentimes larger than we anticipate, growing and focusing on learning, as opposed to trying to go out and make as much money as possible, get as fast as possible. But instead that it's valuable to take a step back and think about, okay, how can I become as smart and as effective as possible? And in the end, the rewards of my efforts and my growth will be found. Postponing gratification, so to speak.
And I'm a real adherent of the strategy you just
Right.
explained. Throughout my life, I've done a lot of free work, a lot of getting into a position and then trying to make the most of doing the work in that position. You need to recognize, too, that means that you have a certain level of privilege and opportunity to do that. As smart or as good as that might be, not everybody has the ability to be able to do that. And I've always been fortunate enough to be in positions where I can do that, still pay my rent,
Right.
still have food to eat, still able to take care of my family with Diane, but have the chance to do that.
If I may ask, when did you meet Diane?
I met Diane as an attorney. Diane was a client.
Really?
And I was representing the company that she was an employee at. I'd tell people that, I found myself in conference room at my law firm with two women getting ready for a trial. One was the client representative, the other one was the expert witness that we used. And some greater power voice I heard in my head telling me that the woman I needed to marry was in this room. There were only two women in the room. One of the women was married and pregnant, so I ended up marrying the other woman. It resulted in wonderful woman, Sarah, who's just a star, as is her sisters. The marriage did not last. About, 8 years later, I found Diane again, and at that point, she was once again single with a couple girls, and we became reacquainted and ended up getting married.
What do you feel like the importance of a strong relationship with your partner is for in your life? Because obviously work's a big part of one's life, but so is family. So how important is it to have a strong relationship with your partner?
Well, for me, pretty invaluable to have the relationship that I have with Diane. I love her. She's really smart and competent and entrepreneurial, and we share a lot of the same values. But there are a lot of things that I've done in life that I don't think I could have done absent having a partner that was willing to help support me in those efforts.
Yeah.
She's also an incredible partner
Yeah.
to have in doing things, and we do a lot of things together.
Yeah.
We did, before I was mayor, we did a lot of nonprofit work for lots of different organizations. We did that together. Mayor was just kind of in a scaling of that work. And we did a lot of the mayor stuff
Right.
together. I trust her judgment, and she's smart. But I think having a partner really expands the opportunities
Yeah.
and potential for two individuals.
You said something which I really liked, which was about your time in the legislature, that for 5 months every 2 years, the person, your partner in the firm, was very patient with you while you underwent the work of the legislative session. I think that's very insightful, right? Having something in my company and in our work, I mean, the strength of my team is everything to me, because I can do literally, I can't transact at all without my teammates. I have none of the skills that are required to make a full business. I can't do it alone. So I feel the importance of that. What do you think some of the important characteristics are of a good business partnership? Or rather, how does one be a great partner in business?
Well, I had a great partner in business with the law firm that we had and ran together for 35 years before I had to step down and walk away from it when I got elected as mayor. Trust, I think, it would be real high on that list, and my business partner I trusted without question or doubt. Somebody whose skill set either matches yours or fills in areas that you're not as strong in, so that together you and your partner cover more ground
Right.
competently.
Right.
Somebody whose work ethic either matches yours or whose philosophy incorporates whatever yours is. Everything we did, we split 50-50. So there were times when he would pull heavier oar than me and vice versa. But I think at some base level, we believe that those things evened out over time. So we never had any of the jealousies or frustrations or missed expectations that some partnerships had. But our law partnership lasted as long or longer than any other that I knew of.
That's fantastic. I love the story of a lot of my business education has been built off the back of a very long partnership. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger at Berkshire Hathaway. I've read every annual report they've filed since the 60s, just because I feel like and that was what always made me want to go into business with friends. You know what I mean? And people who you really liked and who you knew well and who you loved in effect, because it was so motivating to collaborate with those sorts of folks. You mentioned something, going back a little bit to something we were talking about with Diane and your community work and philanthropic stuff. Mm-hmm. You've been a part of a lot of nonprofits, been on the board and such. What was the first of those nonprofits that you worked with here in town? And tell me a little bit about how you got into nonprofit work.
I think probably the first nonprofit I was associated with would probably be Ballet Austin. I like the ballet as an art form. I had the opportunity to date some dancers when I was in college, which meant that I learned more than I would have known otherwise.
That's right.
Really began to appreciate the art form. So I became, when I lived in Austin, a seasoned subscriber to Ballet Austin. They had a really good executive director,
Yeah.
who I think used to mine her season subscriber lists for possible board members.
Really? Who was it?
Cookie Ruiz.
Okay.
And she's still in that position, and she's still one of the best nonprofit executive directors in the city. But she cold called me. I think that one of the people on the board was someone that I knew, and the two of them took me out to lunch and recruited me to be on the board. I was really attracted to that organization because of the strength of the executive director, which was one of the things I look for in terms of which nonprofits we would get involved in. And it was also an organization that, while it was an arts organization, was also very much community focused. So it did a lot of activities to increase access to the art form, access to underserved and non-traditional attendee communities.
Right.
Thematically, it did programs like No Place for, the Holocaust Light and Humanity Project, which was a kind of an anti-bullying campaign. It did that kind of stuff. So it hit on the things that I wanted from a nonprofit organization that I could give time to.
Yeah, I feel like as one matures in one's business career or in one's life, I think it's always good fun to spend a lot of time also contributing to nonprofits, things like along those lines. And for me, it's, I don't necessarily have the money to contribute, but I'll definitely contribute my time and my energy to whatever degree that's valuable to anybody. And I think that for me, one of the reasons I love it is I love looking at diverse groups of problems. You know what I mean? And if you're working on the same thing every day, all the time, sometimes it's nice to work on a new problem set. You're like, oh, these are sorts of things I don't get to think about normally. And then as well, some of these organizations like Ballet Austin, getting to interact with the arts and things along those lines, that sounds so exciting to me. You know what I mean? Like getting to be a part of those rooms. One of the things that has been, that I'd love your opinion on about Austin, is as the city grows and we're becoming more of an economic powerhouse and we're getting an influx of new people every day, how do we retain an appreciation for the weirdness of Austin and our appreciation for things like music and the arts?
Over the course of the time that I've been in Austin, which has been a long time, almost from the very beginning, there's always been those voices that have lamented that Austin has changed. I know that I got here in 1978, that the people who got here with me in 1978 are sure that it were the people that got here in 1979 that started screwing up the place. But the people who got here 4 years ago are talking about the people who got here 2 years ago.
Right.
And it just seems to be a recurrent theme.
Right.
In my mind, the things that make this city unique and special are equally as true today as they were back when I got here. This is a community of people that are entrepreneurial and creative and innovative. They care about one another. I think the real differentiator in this community is that there's a higher tolerance for taking risks in this community than any city that I've been in the world. And you see that in art and music, but also restaurants, but also adoption of cutting-edge technologies, and the fact that that Willie Nelson decided to come to Austin in the 70s to reinvent country music, and who listened to country music. There's a reason he came to Austin, I think, to do that. So I think people self-select to live in this city because of those kinds of cultural aspects.
Yeah.
Those cultural aspects are true today.
Yeah.
And I think that so long as we're able to maintain that, will continue to be this city. I remember when I got here, there was controversy about a new club that had just opened up on Guadalupe.
Really?
And people were concerned about it, in part because it was new. It wasn't part of Austin. It wasn't, this new club. People were nervous about it, and but the hole in the wall did fine. And now we're here, 45, 50 years later, and people imagine if the hole in the wall went away, we would no longer be Austin anymore. Except that I remember when the hole in the wall got here.
Right.
So I think the city is still, in its most important aspects, still the same.
I love that perspective for me because it's fundamentally optimistic in my mind, and that's something I really like. I think there was something I read the other day that ever since things have been decent anywhere, people have been claiming that it was all downhill. So if you go to any town, any place, you're like, well, you should have seen it 10 years ago and it was really great. And people before them are saying, you should have seen it 10 years before that. But I just think that's the character of people. You know what I mean? We like what we like, and, perhaps we are most romantic about how things were when we first got there or when we were young. And so I like that because it keeps us thinking that one of the things that frustrates me sometimes about rhetoric is it's so easy to focus on all the things that are wrong. And there are a lot of things wrong, always have been, always will be. But what if we could also appreciate the things that have improved? Because I think there's a substantial number of them.
I think so too. And, there was a recent article again, I think it was in the New Yorker, by somebody roughly my age, lamenting the fact that Austin had changed so much. And I was asked to comment on it. And I said, my real comment was that it's a bitch to grow old,
Right.
which is how I read the story. I think a lot of people kind of romanticize a place based on what it was like when they got there.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth.
Oh, yeah.
They're all great cities.
Yes.
Very different from Austin. Back in the 70s, people would come and live in Austin because they didn't want to live in those cities because that wasn't for them.
Right.
You would still say that exact same thing today. We just have to maintain our difference as they need to maintain theirs, but
Right.
we have to maintain ours. And I think that today, even today, people would just as vociferously describe why it is they want to be in Austin as opposed to those other cities.
Right. You were mayor during some of Austin's most explosive growth years, too. So I feel like your perspective on that is really interesting, seeing as people evolve and change. In the time you spent out of office, have you felt like that rhetoric about negativity about the city has increased, or is it just about the same as it always has been? And I guess that's what I'm trying to understand is, do you feel like people are more frustrated now than they have been before, or that this is just the general flow of how life is in any city?
I think that there is increased angst and anxiety and increased partisan and political differences that are hard and mean today than in the past. So I think that there were differences before, and the differences back used to be between developers and environmentalists and other kinds of things which are not really the where the battle lines are drawn today. The difference is that a lot of the things we're dealing with today have been nationalized politically, so that we're less likely to be dealing with a difference in Austin as much as we're dealing with a difference that is is being cast as a national issue.
Right.
The debate between environmentalists and developers in Austin was really more local, and people would talk about particular projects and particular initiatives and particular opportunities. But now we're dealing with questions of safety and that have been nationalized. Homelessness, nationalized issue.
Yes,
Whether we're
yes.
safe in this community, nationalized issue. And a lot of times we're no longer talking about how those issues actually play out in this city or
Right.
why they rose in this city. Where really this city just becomes a stalking horse for what is really a national policy debate. And those national policy debates are now so filled with misinformation, disinformation, and so weaponized with the use of fear that we're dealing with a very different dynamic now than what we used to.
Yeah, I heard one thing recently which really reminded me of what you were talking about. Debbie Hyatt, who I think is the manager of KUT and who is like an NPR board member, she was at a panel for the Kosmeski Center. She was talking about local versus the national news picture. She was talking about one of the reporters nearby who works for the Fredericksburg Standard. It's just a very different sort of outlet than our major news sources. And one of the things she was saying is that the national news cycle and the national news has turned into oftentimes a lot of caricatures, whereas in the local news, and you know your reporters, they've seen you at the supermarket or whatever, and so you trust them because regardless whether or not you agree or disagree with their story, they're people, and you know that to be true. You've seen them, as opposed to listening to an entity who we all of a sudden are suspicious of, whose motivations we don't understand, whose participants and constituents aren't as clear to us. So I feel like your point there is exactly right. When we have local information, I find that the fight, there's still fights. Save Our Springs against the developers, those are some fights. You know what I mean? I've got lots of friends from that time period, and I've heard lots of old war stories that have been lots of fun. But, in some way they seem to me still to be more humane in a way, because you knew the people involved. You could concretely understand the participants, as opposed to some of the stuff which I think we worry about today, some of the anxieties we have today, which in my mind often exist more in the ether. You know what I mean? You're not exactly sure who you feel like the enemy is or what the problem is. You just know that everyone's nervous about it. Something along those lines. So one of the things that really interested me about your path to becoming mayor is that even though you spent some time working in the legislature, it wasn't as if you first ran for council and then were participating in the city in that regard and then transitioned there. Instead, a lot of your experience with the city came from philanthropic work, nonprofits, being a part of that community. How do you feel like having that background as opposed to, running for school board, then running for council, then running for mayor? How do you feel like governing from that background influenced your leadership?
I think it's a different place to get into local government than a lot of people. It's a different path than a lot of people follow. You do nonprofit work with organizations that are trying to do good work in a city, and you intersect with government policy a lot.
Right.
And as I said earlier, sometimes that's government policy is really helpful and additive, and sometimes it's not. So the perspective that I brought to the council table probably different than the perspective that many of my colleagues brought.
Yeah.
But you were right. I did not follow that traditional path. I had never seen a city council meeting.
Really? Wow.
Until the first one that I ran as mayor. So it was not something that I had been pointing to or working toward. I had never discussed it with Diane, and from the time that we decided to run or talk about running to actually running was like 3 weeks.
Really? Wow.
It kind of went that quickly.
So what was the impetus?
At that point in time, in 2014, as 2014 was starting, end of 2013, the city had decided to move to an at-large council.
Right.
Away from to a district council, away from an at-large council, which meant that almost everybody on council was going to be new. Most times, when cities and counties moved from a at-large to a district council around the country, government fails because it devolves into a ward politic kind of thing for 4 to 8 years. There were a group of us that thought that Austin couldn't afford that at this moment in time. We were just about to launch into Austin's golden years, and we didn't want to have. We wanted to have a mayor that was also new, like the council would be new. We went out to recruit someone to come and run for mayor, and there were some people in town that would have made great mayors. They all said no. So eventually we locked ourselves in a room and said, okay, one of us has to stop what they're doing and go try to do this mayor thing. And Diane and I drew the short straw.
I was like going to ask that. I was like, well, I guess it ought to be me. Would you do it again?
No question. No question. It was a phenomenal job. It kind of disrupted our lives.
Right.
We stopped my law practice as I was entering probably what would have been my most financially rewarding years. But the experience was just incredible. The people that you get a chance to meet, the challenges that you get a chance to work on, the rooms that you get invited to be in, the network that you develop. I'd spent a lot of years practicing law, and there was part of me that was feeling guilty that I wasn't doing everything that I could do or thought that I would be doing when I was in my 20s to really help the community. And being mayor gave me the opportunity to try to improve people's lives at scale. And that's such a privilege and a gift. I would say it was an incredible job. The best elected official job I think that exists is mayor.
Right.
And yes, I'm really happy that we made that choice.
It's super fun. So one of the things that's really been an advent of the last 10, 15 years is a lot of the surrounding cities of Austin, Round Rock, Cedar Park, Kyle, Buda, they've all begun to become pretty substantial in their own right. What kind of an effect do you think that has on our city? And do you see that? Yeah, how do you interpret that? Do you see that as an opportunity for more advancement? And also, how do we work together with these communities?
I think the growth of the surrounding cities and communities is wonderful. There was a period of time where the only real population concentrated center was downtown Austin. And Austin's strategic plan called for us to create more activity nodes.
Really?
So that everybody didn't have to be downtown to enjoy those kinds of benefits that come from a dense area. But if we could have multiple activity centers around the city closer to where other people live, that would be a good thing for the quality of people's lives. I believe that.
Yeah.
And I believe that the growth of these other cities provides some measure of that. Takes the pressure off of everybody wanting to live downtown Austin when living downtown Georgetown is a exciting and viable option. Right. Downtown Cedar Park. As those things grow, I mean, they've become real viable choices. When I was mayor, I tried to move past what had historically been sort of a confrontational and competitive relationship between Austin and the surrounding communities to work a lot more cooperatively. that was a real high priority for me. When we were doing economic development activities, whenever we found ourselves competing with another city in and around Austin, that set off alarm bells to me. When Samsung was looking to pick a location, I was more than happy to compete very hard against New York and Arizona to make sure that those middle-skilled tech jobs were here that enable people to go from $35,000 a year, $40,000 a year to $60,000 and $70,000 a year. But when the competition turned into one between Austin and a suburb of Austin, I didn't care whether they were in Austin or not. I didn't care whether Tesla was in the city limits or just outside the city limits, because I believe all of those activities help strengthen the economy of Central Texas as a whole. And ultimately, I think that's where the future of this region lies.
Precisely. Yeah, I think community thinking like that is one of the, I feel like the more successful a person is, in my experience, is kind of anecdotal, the better they understand the power of collaboration. And not and that's one of the things that I found that's very interesting, is oftentimes I found there'll be a lot of people who are very suspicious of collaboration, which is not a literal, direct, simple transaction. But instead thinking about how, and I gave a presentation on this, which was maybe somewhat unpopular in my early years of college, is it's like, I didn't believe we could ask corporations to be less selfish. I thought we should ask corporations to be smarter. Because a really, truly selfish person knows that if they benefit their community and they make their community an excellent place to work and live, in the end, they're going to reap as much rewards as anyone else. You know what I mean? Someone who's community-focused, someone who brings up the people around them in addition to themselves, will reap more rewards than someone who tries to keep all the goodies for themselves. And I feel like that is a key difference I find between people who are able to grow and make change and those who kind of, just teeter out, limited by whatever the cap of their skills and their energy is. One of the things that was really interesting about your tenure is that many times you led the city through points that were unprecedented. How do you make decisions when everybody's watching, but there's no playbook?
A lot of the decisions that we confronted when I was mayor were unprecedented. We had an anonymous bomber that was killing people by putting bombs on people's porches and tripwires across sidewalks. We had 300-year storms, 3 storms that are only supposed to happen once every 100 years, that led to flooding and ice storms, and we did 2.5 citywide water boils. Cities of 1 million people where nobody can drink the water and you have to boil it just don't happen. We had obviously COVID. We had the George Floyd summer and the period of extreme racial tensions. A lot of crises and a lot of places where I didn't know the answer. Interesting enough that I've written a book about it that I think is going to come out in April and May.
Okay.
Get published that goes into detail on some of those. When you're confronted in that situation, you try to surround yourself with the smartest, wisest people you can find,
right?
So that you get people to give you advice. Hopefully, the advice will be advice that where people are agreeing, so that you feel good about the decision that you're making. But not always. The advice I got from the police chief and Secret Service about whether we should go into a citywide curfew the night of the George Floyd protests on the second or third night was not advice that I thought was right, and made a decision different than what was being recommended. And then spent all night worrying that I would wake up tomorrow morning with a headline that said the city erupted in riots and the mayor refused to take the advice of the police chief, and that's why we're in this horrible place.
Right.
You lose sleep over those possibilities. Some of the choices we made when I shut down South by Southwest early in COVID was not something that any city had done at that point. Within 2 weeks, every city was doing that, but at the time that I did it, it was unprecedented. You make the best decision you can. You try to rally as much sage and wise advice as you can get, but ultimately you're elected to make some of those decisions. So you make them as best you possibly can and as motivated altruistically and for the benefit of the community as you can.
Yeah. How does it feel to make those? How does it feel when the pressure is all on you to make a decision, and ultimately only you are the person who can decide, knowing that if you get it right or if you get it wrong, the stakes can be as severe as they were, for example, during COVID?
It's it's scary to do that, and like I said, you can lose sleep over that. But at the end of the day, that's your job. That's
I like that.
You volunteered to to put yourself in that position.
Right.
So you do the best that you can do. You don't want to be immobilized by that fear and anxiousness. You don't want to make less than the best decision you can possibly make. You also know that whatever you do is going to get criticized by someone. There will always be trolls on social media that will come after you. I used to say that if I announced to the community that the sun was going to come up tomorrow, 16% of the city would call me a damn liar. And say that's not true, and how could I possibly know that? And but that's okay.
Right.
You know that social media does not represent necessarily the viewpoint of most of the people that live in your community.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people not participating that way on social media that that are in your corner and support you, that may or may not like any particular decision that you make.
Yeah.
But understand that you're making the best decision that you can, and will support you in that effort.
Yeah.
And I always knew that whether the decision proved to be right or proved to not have been the best decision, that when I came home, Diane and my girls would still think I was pretty cool. And at the end of the day, that was enough.
I think that's one of the most motivating and important things I've heard. Because in my life, even on a small scale, you're making decisions, you're doing difficult things. I think at anyone's point, you're doing the best you can. You're working on problems that, however small in reality, seem awful big at the moment. And having that background where you're like, well, I'm pretty sure my mom will still like me okay at the end if I screw it all up. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a power and a value to that goes beyond just about anything else. And I think that it's the only way we can govern or make decisions from any position of strength.
And you have the opportunity, again, to choose the people that are around you. I had wonderful, extraordinary staff.
Yeah. Like Barbara Shack.
Like Barbara Shack. And John Michael Cortez and Leslie Varghese, who were my chiefs of staff.
Right.
But just a really strong staff from top to bottom. And you trust, you question, you probe, you push, but you trust and respect the people that you choose to surround yourself with.
Right. One other thing you said that I think is exactly right, is the importance of understanding how to treat social media. Obviously, our company works in social media. It's a big field of study for us. And when we advise municipalities, specifically on stuff like economic growth, one of the things we tell them is like, listen, we know what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. You're trying to make very difficult decisions on how to govern your city. And at the end of the day, right, there will always be some portion of people who don't like you just because you're doing something new or just because you're doing something that, for whatever reason. And that alone cannot stop you from making the tough decisions that are required to have your city grow and change and evolve. And I think that being able to coach them on how to treat social media comments. We have a client recently who was like, hey, like we'd love to broadcast our news about our resources we have for our community digitally, but we're scared that we're going to get trolls because we have in the past people commenting at us on Facebook and being rude to us. We're like, got to turn off the comments. You know what I mean? I one of my favorite stories from you that I tell often is your story about not reading the comments. But one of the things we do for our clients, like, hey, here's how you turn off the comments. Because I think, as we well know, no matter what, any sensitive person is always going to, it's like the forbidden fruit wanting to know what people are saying. And in the end, there's always someone from Akron, Ohio, commenting on the governance of the city of Austin, though they have no insight whatsoever about how things are out on the ground. So one of the ways I know you're spending a lot of your time in the present day is teaching at Austin's universities. Now, at the very beginning of our discussion, I know you mentioned that being teaching and education being a common thread in your life and your roles. How's teaching been so far for college kids?
I love it, and I've had the gift of being invited to teach on 3 different campuses here in the city. Situations are different. Students are in some ways really different, and in some ways the exact same. Mm-hmm. I've met some wonderful faculty members at the different institutions. Mm-hmm. I'm at the LBJ School teaching grad students, and at St. Edward's University working with Professor Thomason.
I like that guy.
He's a good guy at the Kosminski Center, but also Michael Hirsch, professor at Houston Tillotson. So there's some dedicated, strong, selfless educators. So I enjoy teaching.
That's great. Steve, I have one last question for you. For future leaders, people who are interested in, or people who have never run for elected office, who have never worked on a nonprofit, something like that, but who are nervous and somewhat intimidated by what they don't understand about it, what would you say to them about taking that first leap towards working for their community?
Take the leap. It's not, the water's fine. There's very little to be afraid of. And the doors that open and the experiences that are to be had are extraordinary. The feeling of satisfaction of being able to participate in and give back to something larger than yourself, to really engage civically in your community are valuable and almost always realized. So I'd say if someone has the time or is amenable to making the time or putting forth any measure of effort, there are so many opportunities to get engaged in so many different ways with at so many different levels of commitment. It's entirely possible to find exactly the kind of experience that you'd like to have in multiple places that you can choose from. Mm-hmm. And I know people are tired and they're busy, but there's nothing that makes you feel more awake and more alive than participating Sometimes it's hard to get off the couch when you're tired.
Oh, yeah.
But when you do get off the couch and engage with your community and around people, almost invariably you look back and say, well, actually that was fun. That was good. I'm happy that I did that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Steve. I'm super excited to be reading your book. You said that comes out in April?
Yes.
So I'm going to be ordering a copy, Amazon, anywhere I can get my books.
Well,
I'm super
thank you
thrilled.
for that.
Well, you don't have to thank me. I'm looking forward to stealing some of the knowledge in there. It's going to be super exciting. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks for inviting me to be on.